Hello, everyone. Good morning. The piano music you just heard is your signal to settle into your seats and prepare for the start of our worship service. Before we begin, I have a few quick announcements. Actually, the announcements are here. There's a lot of really good stuff going on you can read about. Top of mind this morning, a new facilities team is being formed. And I heard that they're really interested in someone that knows something about air conditioning. So be sure to check out these announcements so we can find out what we're doing. There's a lot, like I said, a lot of good stuff going on, really neat stuff to do, but also to find out about what we've been doing. So it's a great way to do that. All right, now let us begin. It says on my instructions to ring that gently because I think the last time I was up here I really hammered it. Good morning and welcome to San Gabriel Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Whether you are here in the sanctuary or watching at home, hello people at home, we are so glad that you're here. My name is John Shaw, my pronouns are he, him, and I have been a member of San Gabriel since 2021. In addition to serving as lay leader, I enjoy contributing to the fellowship as treasurer, and I'm on the stewardship team, which I'll be talking about a little bit later. Today, our shiny new pulpiteer, Eric, will be taking us on an introspective look at our church experience. San Gabriel is a member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association. There are over 1,000 UU congregations in the United States. All of us together are working for a just, peaceful, and sustainable world. Sustaining each other here in community is the first step down the long road of that important work.
Good morning. I am Eric Hepburn, and I might be shiny now, but I look forward to a good patina. I am San Gabriel's pulpiteer, and I'd like to especially welcome any guests we have today. If it's your first time here, thank you for coming. I hope you'll stay for after service for coffee and conversation, and if you would do me the kindness, please fill out a visitor card in the seat back pocket, because I am curious to learn more about you and what you're searching for. Please know that whoever you are, wherever you're from, whomever you love, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. Let us greet this day in song. Our opening hymn is Be Ours a Religion, which is number 1058 in the Teal Hymnal, and the lyrics will also be projected. Joe will play the hymn once through as an introduction. Please rise in body and spirit as you're able. As we light our chalice, we create sacred space together. I call you into this time of connection within, among, and beyond with the words of Charles Eisenstein. I am surrounded by many, many other people who themselves, imperfectly as I do, hold the same story. Together we move deeper and deeper into it. Enlightenment is a group activity.
Our affirmation is an expression of our covenant with one another. Please read after me. The words should be projected. There they are. The doctrine of this church is love. We are here to love. The quest of truth is its sacrament. We are here to learn. Service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace. We are here to live in peace. To seek knowledge and freedom. We are here to honor our differences. To serve humanity in fellowship. We are all connected to serve. To the end that all souls shall grow in harmony with the divine. We are here to grow. Thus do we covenant with one another. And now here's Karina with the Wonder Box. I was jumping the gun there.
As we love to learn together. We learn from one another. And one way we do that is by sharing our thoughts, what we're thinking about, we might be feeling, and what our guesses might be as to what's inside the Wonder Box today. So, giving you some clues there. It's feeling kind of clunky. Anybody have a guess as to what might be in this Wonder Box today? Rocks. Definitely feels one rock. Any other ideas? A book? Carolyn says one of her bran muffins. Are those during coffee hour today? We'll need to stay away. Any other thoughts about what might be in here before I open it up? Toys? Heavy toys? Blocks? All right, y'all. Okay, what does that make you think of? Lunch? Warhol. Andy Warhol, yeah. I had to go with a classic. A can of soup. Any other thoughts about why I might have put a can of soup in the Wonder Box today? The little free pantry, that is exactly where it's going to go after we're done. Any other thoughts? Comfort? All right, let's see what our story is going to tell us about soup today.
Thank you, Omo. Written and illustrated by Oge Mora. There's a note here. Omu is pronounced Amu and is the Igbo term for queen. Igbo is a language spoken by people in southeast Nigeria. Thank You, Amu, published by Little Brown and Company. On the corner of First Street and Long Street, on the very top floor, Amu was cooking a thick red stew in a big fat pot for a nice evening meal. She seasoned and stirred it and took a small taste. "What a delicious stew," Amu said. "Tonight's dinner will surely be the best I have ever had." With that, Amu put down her spoon and went to read a book before supper. As the thick red stew simmered on the stove, its scrumptious scent wafted down the window and out the door, down the hall, toward the street, and around the block until, knock, someone was at the door. When Amu opened it, she saw a little boy. "Little boy," Amu exclaimed, "what brings you to my home?" "I was playing with my race car down the hall when I smelled the most delicious smell," he replied. "What is it?" "Thick red stew." Stew," he sighed. "That sure sounds yummy." Amu thought for a moment. She was saving her stew for dinner, but she had made quite a bit. It would not hurt to share. "Would you like some?" The little boy nodded. And so Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. "Thank you, Amu," the little boy said, and went on his way. With that, Amu closed the door and went back to her book. As she read, her thick red stew's scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall, toward the street, and around the block until, knock, knock, someone was at the door. When Amu opened the door, this time she saw a police officer. "Mrs. Police Officer," Amu exclaimed, "what brings you to my home?" "I was on duty down the street when I smelled the most delicious smell," Miss Police Officer replied. "What is it?" "Thick red stew." "Ah, stew," she said, and her mouth watered. "That sounds mighty tasty." Amu thought for a moment. There was still enough to share. "Would you like some?" The police officer nodded. Well, once again, Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. "Thank you, Amu," the officer said, and went on her way. And so for the second time, Amu closed the door and went back to her book. Sure enough, as she read, her thick red stew's scrumptious scent wafted down the window and out the door, down the hall, toward the street, and around the block until, knock, 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 again someone was at Amu's door. This time when she opened it, she saw a hot dog vendor. "Mr. Hot Dog Vendor," Amu exclaimed, "what brings you to my home?" "I was selling my hot dogs down the block when I smelled the most delicious smell," Mr. Hot Dog Vendor replied. "What is it?" "Thick red stew." "Ooh, stew." The vendor licked his lips. "That sounds quite delectable." So Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. "Thank you, Amu," the hot dog vendor said, and went on his way. Throughout the day, people from all across the neighborhood knocked on Amu's door. She fed a shop owner, a cab driver, a doctor, an actor, a lawyer, a dancer, a baker, an artist, a singer, an athlete, a bus driver, a construction worker. Even the mayor stopped by. And each time they knocked, Amu shared. Soon the sky darkened, the streets brightened, and it was finally time for dinner. But when Amu opened her big fat pot of thick red stew for her nice evening meal, it was empty. Amu sniffled. "There goes the best dinner I ever had." Sorry and blue, she sat at the table with her empty pot until knock, 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 knock. Who could that be? Amu wondered. When she opened her door, she saw the little boy, the police officer, the hot dog vendor, the shop owner, the cab driver, the doctor, the actor, the lawyer, the dancer, the baker. Why, everyone she fed was at her door. "I'm sorry, everyone," Amu sighed. "My thick red stew is all gone. I have nothing left to share." The little boy tugged at Amu's sleeve. "Don't worry, Amu. We are not here to ask. We are here to give." The police officer carried in a fresh salad. The mayor entered with a roast chicken. The baker brought a collection of sweet goodies. Even the little boy presented Amu with something special in a shiny red envelope. Everyone who had knocked on Amu's door that day squeezed inside her tiny apartment, and together they ate, danced, and celebrated. While Amu's big fat pot of thick red stew was empty, her heart was full of happiness and love. That dinner was the best she had ever had. The end.
There were a couple tense moments in that story, weren't there? There were some times where Amu's sharing the thick red stew that she had made for her own dinner with everyone who asked, and even though She realized that it might be running out. She kind of chose to be vulnerable in that moment, and she remained generous nonetheless. I think we're all relieved that everyone reciprocated and brought something back to share with her. But while Amu is grateful for her thank you gifts, I think she recognized the biggest she received, that everyone received in that moment, was the connection and community they created through their sharing. And I believe Eric is going to speak more to that today. We will talk a little more in our sharing, about sharing in our time together today. And if there's anyone who'd like to do that with me, we can go do that now. All right.
Before I dive into this thing that I've written, I just want to stay with Amu for just a second, because I want us to recognize something. It's a strand that's going to show up in what I'm talking about today, and that is that the dominant story, the dominant meta-narrative that we're all exposed to on a daily basis doesn't end with Amu sitting down to a community dinner. It ends with Amu alone and sad in her apartment because she exists in an uncaring and disconnected universe. And so it's difficult living inside that story for us to imagine that our generosity might actually be rewarded, that there might in fact be some higher power or energy or something beyond our description, some karmic force that noticed what we did. I don't mean to strain your credulity, but I do want you to get curious about how diminished your world is if the kind of thing that happened to Amu in this story is just the lucky happenstance that happens once in a while, and not the default of what it is like to be blessed with being alive with each other. All right. So, what is it that church is for? Is it a social club? Or on a UU tip, maybe a general purpose social justice nonprofit? Is it entertainment, a show, a musical performance, a Sunday morning daycare respite? Is it a lecture, a ceremony, a ritual? Is it a participatory ticket to the preferred afterlife? Why, when so many of us have experienced trauma and disconnect and worse, at organizations and institutions called churches, are we at one again? What are we searching for? What are we hungry for? Why do we keep coming back when it can be so hard? When there are times that this is yet another place where we have to confront our own demons and deal with many of the same difficulties of being in community and in relationship that we struggle with at work or with our families or with our friends or our neighbors. This is not a trivial question, especially at a time when so many are unchurched and even more self-identify as spiritual but not religious. I'm going to make a few propositions, see how they land for you. You say you want a community. And while that is both true and important, it isn't why you're here. You say you want your kids to get exposed to world religions in an unbiased and inclusive way. Or you say that you want to provide such a place for the next generation. Also important, also true, and still not why you're here. Maybe you say you want to be surrounded by like-minded people or to have some co-conspirators in your plots and schemes to bring some justice to the marginalized or the unhoused or the oppressed. Maybe so, but still not why you're here. You want music, you want some ritual, some quiet time, some time for reflection, you want some edification, some challenge, something new to think about, something that helps you shift your perspective. All true, all good, and yet still not why this place exists. Although with each of these nudges, perhaps we inch a bit closer. The uncomfortable truth is that you've got a nagging suspicion that just won't go away, that there must be more to life than this. More than all the banal money and power play that passes for important out there in the culture. More than the next protest against the ways we keep hurting each other and the planet. More than the latest self-help book or diet guru or exercise regiment. More than the latest vacation to some exotic place so that you can feel, however briefly, alive again. That's what church is for. It is the unshakable suspicion that there is something larger and that you are important to it, that it needs you too as desperately as you need it. That's the string that keeps pulling on your heart and your head and your gut and your awareness until you're back in a pew or on a meditation retreat or doing rosaries, or whatever practices it is that you've discovered that alleviate that pull, that help you feel, however transiently, back in touch with yourself and with that something larger that keeps finding subtle ways to let you know that you're not as alone as your own mind would have you believe. That is what church is for. We aren't a lecture series to convince us intellectually of the existence, or for that matter, the non-existence of God. We are at a church to deepen our relationship with the divine, whatever name we give it. We are at a church that will use words and intellect and knowledge and stories and myths and song lyrics and poetry and whatever symbols it can find to destroy the hard-won certainties that litter our field of consciousness, preventing us from apprehending the truth. The simple truth that we are divine, that the divine is in us and all around us, that it cares about us. That caring we have for each other is but a weak reflection of how deeply we are all cared for. I know it's hard to believe. That's why I'm not trying to convince you. I mean, I will. I will spend the next year that we have together searching for the right words, the right stories, the right myths and song lyrics and poetry, and I will pour them into your ears on purpose, hoping that they will seep into the tiny cracks in the boulders of your certainty. And as the seasons of your mind progress and that water of life poured into your cracks freezes and thaws, well, maybe some of your certainties about how life is and about how it isn't will begin to crack. Maybe they'll crack enough that they can become part of the soil in the garden of your mind. Boulders giving way to growing and flowering and living things. And maybe, if we're very lucky, we'll be together long enough to see those seasons come again. For your first crops to die and decay and become soil again. For a new generation of sprouts to push through the surface of your garden and bring new life out of that necessary, beautiful death. To bring new thoughts and insights and wisdom into that garden of yours. Maybe even you'll decide to share that garden with the rest of us. To let us wonder and awe and relish the fruits of your spiritual labor. Because that's what church is for. It is the unshakable suspicion that there is something larger and that you're important to it, that it needs you as desperately as you need it. That's the string that keeps pulling on your heart and your head and your gut and your awareness until you're back in a pew or on a meditation retreat or doing rosaries or whatever practices you've discovered that alleviate that pull, that help you feel, however transiently, back in touch with yourself and with that larger something that keeps finding subtle ways to let you know that you're not as alone as your own mind would have you believe. That's what church is for. We aren't a social justice nonprofit. Don't mistake me. I'm glad we have our yellow shirts. I'm glad that we show up for our marches and protests, and I'm glad we show up for others at their marches and protests. I'm glad we're engaging in the work of social justice, but the church is a calling to push the roots of that justice work deeper. The church is a catalyst to more transformative justice work, not just more justice work. Given where we're at in this moment, I'm sure most of you have heard, at least in passing, that concern about performative justice work. Am I right? Can I get an amen? All right. I might do that to you from time to time. And I know that's not what you all want, but not wanting it isn't enough, not by a long shot. The key to turning the corner from performative justice work to real justice work is the moment when your comfort is lower on your list of priorities than the health and well-being and safety of the least among us. Jesus didn't preach about the least of these because he was being cute or clever. He was trying to teach us one of the deepest truths about the human condition, of the condition of life in this universe as we know it. You will suffer the depredation that is imposed upon the least living thing in your world. The pain in your heart will not go away as long as there are human beings in bondage and in cages and in prisons and in solitary confinement. The pain in your heart will not go away as long as there is war and murder and genocide. The pain in your heart will not go away until the hunger and famine and disease are priorities being addressed around the world. The pain in your heart will not go away as long as the factory farms are running and the fields polluted with chemicals and all of it, because the pain in your heart is not yours alone. It is the pain in the divine heart to which you are inextricably connected. So, we will learn to be heartbroken together. We will learn what so many have tried to teach, that only in accepting our own heartbrokenness can we show up to the work that we are called to do. When we can't accept it, we run around hyper-vigilantly over-functioning, trying to stick our finger in every crack in the dam and wondering why we can't make progress. When we learn to be heartbroken, we learn to be still enough to answer the call of the divine in our lives, to show up to the work that we were made for. Now, I know it's hard to believe, but there is a spot in that dam that was made just for you. No one else can plug it because no one else is you. But that work requires the lion's share of your attention and your awareness and your love and gumption and tenacity, and you can't find any of that within yourself if you're convinced you're all alone. And we live in a world that is working hard to convince us that we are all alone. Am I right? Can I get an amen? Here's the toxic story. You are alone in an uncaring and mechanistic universe that cares neither for you or for your people or for any people or for life, which is just all happenstance anyway. That's our scientism, isn't it? Our banal materialism wrapped up in pseudoscience masquerading as a metaphysical fact. We are here to kill that toxic story, to replace it with a story that is true to life, true to our lives, and as true an expression of the divinity we share as we are capable of. That's what church is for. It is the unshakable suspicion that there is something larger and that you are important to it, that it needs you too, as desperately as you need it. That's the string that keeps pulling on your heart and your head and your gut and your awareness until you're back in a pew or on a meditation retreat or doing rosaries or whatever practices you've discovered that alleviate that pull, that help you feel, however transiently, back in touch with yourself and with that larger something that keeps finding subtle ways to let you know you are not as alone as your mind would have you believe. That's what church is for. Oh, friends, we are not a social club. To be sure, many churches function in this way, and we will have sermons on the topic in the coming year. I think we'll even revisit a 20-year-old sermon from one of my early mentors, Reverend Dr. Davidson Lohr, called Why Unitarian Universalism is Dying. Lest you think that my iconoclasm isn't a part of my own lineage. Learned from my own elders. Now, Reverend Lohr's sermon doesn't talk explicitly about exoteric versus esoteric religion, and there are volumes of debate about the proper usage and application of those terms. But here's how they relate to what we're talking about this morning. For all intents and purposes, the exoteric religion of Unitarian Universalism is the seven principles, or the new thing that's about to replace them. It is the chalice and the chalice lighting. It is the practice of joys and concerns and the flags and icons of the world's religions that we hang on the wall. It is the UU identity that so many are keen on fostering. It's the flower ceremony and the water ceremony and the blessing of the backpacks or laptops or whatever the kids are carrying these days. And it's all fine, just fine. But in the spirit of today's inquiry, it is certainly not what church is for. It is the window dressing of church. It is the costuming of church. It is the way in which we differentiate church and our church from other churches and from other aspects of our lives. But it is not why. It is not what church is for. Now, I'm going to skate on some thin theological ice here. Many before me, centuries worth, millennia worth, have argued that we need exoteric religion. That the exoteric religion is the house inside of which we build the altar. In this analogy, the altar is the esoteric religion. This view purports that, well, most people just aren't ready to really practice religion deeply. So we give them a shallow religion for the masses. But smuggled inside that religion for the masses is a deeper, more mystical, more divinely connected and inspired true religion. As the word esoteric suggests, it is the religion that is too radical to be known by everybody, so we keep it a secret. I might be compelled by this logic if there wasn't an obvious historical pattern of the exoteric religion's leaders constantly and consistently burning their esoteric practitioners at the stake, or crucifying them, or having them drawn and quartered, or in terms more modern, excommunication, fatwa, smear campaigns. You get the picture. I'm not convinced that any exoteric religion has ever passed the test of being worth the paper it was printed on. I'm not convinced that you're not ready for deep religion, or that this was true of those who came before you. Was Jesus really that much more of an outlier 2,000 years ago than Dr. King was 60 years ago? Or than Gandhi was 80 years ago? Or, for that matter, Gautama Siddhartha or Lao Tzu or Mozi 2,500 years ago? No, I don't think so. They were outliers then, and they would be outliers today. So I'm not convinced that we need a big cultural house within which to build our altar. I think that proposition was made by people who were interested in building big cultural houses over which they could have dominion. I think we would be just as well off building our altars out in a field under the stars, or by the side of a brook under the canopy of an old tree, or up the side of a jagged mountain exposed to the chill winds. I want you to connect with the divine in yourself, with the divine in your siblings and neighbors, to the larger divine that is the source of all that divinity. That is the heart and soul and center of all esoteric religion, regardless of the window dressing, regardless of the buildings or costumes or languages or rituals. If a ritual, however beautiful, ancient, or avowedly sacred, fails to connect you to the divine, it is, for you, exoteric and not esoteric, and you should leave it behind as quickly as you can. Your search is for ritual that resonates with you, for practices that connect you with your own divinity and with the larger divinity. And I hope that we can do that together here. I hope that we can invite other neighbors in our Georgetown community to join us here for that, because that's what church is for. It is the unshakable suspicion that there is something larger and that you're important to it, that it needs you too, as desperately as you need it. That's the string that keeps pulling on your heart and your head and your gut and your awareness until you're back in a pew or on a meditation retreat or doing rosaries or whatever practice it is that you've found that makes you feel, however transiently, reconnected to back in touch with yourself and with that something larger that keeps finding subtle ways to let you know that you are not as alone as your own mind would have you believe. That's what church is for. Now that's the end of the sermon, but since I've already skated on thin ice theologically, I'll do so again, but this time processually. I usually don't like mixing church business into the sermon, although it frequently happens at times of stewardship. But there's another process happening in the church right now, as important as stewardship, and I won't lie, of particular and significant importance to me. Now, if you're sitting there in that chair thinking, oh, we got to stop this guy, I'm sorry, but I'm going to ask you to keep your hand down and your butt in your seat. But if, on the other hand, you're thinking that what I just laid out for you this morning, all this business about spiritual deepening and finding your justice calling and connecting with the divine, if you find yourself wanting that kind of journey for yourself and for this church, if you find yourself yearning to be a bigger part of that journey, to do more than show up on Sundays to bring that into fruition, then I have an ask of you. Right back there running our tech for today's service is Rob Berthold. Now, Rob also happens to be the chair of our nominating committee. Sarah Smith, our outgoing board president, is going to be partnering with me as the incoming chair for Sunday services, and I'm glad that we're going to be working together. And Keith Hutchinson, our board vice president, has agreed to serve another term in that role, and I'm glad to get to continue to work with Keith. For those of you who don't know, Keith bears some significant amount of either credit or blame for me being your pulpiteer. He and I had lunch the day after Reverend Yandel announced that they were leaving, which is how I found out and threw my hat, both unceremoniously and prematurely, into the ring. But that leaves the hole I want to talk about. The board needs a new president for next year, and I would really like for that position to be filled by someone who's excited about and aligned with the vision of church that I've just shared with y'all. So if that might be you, if being one of my key partners in our journey together over this next year appeals to you, please go check in with Rob after the service. All right, that's enough of that. Time for joys and concerns. Let's pause, take a breath, recenter our bodies. This thing I'm about to tell you did not make the sermon. It was on the cutting room floor. But I'm going to share it with you now anyway. I learned something deep by participating in something called Wellspring, which is kind of the next step up from what do you call chalice circles here? It's something, your sharing groups, the small group ministries? Connections. Connections groups, teams? Connection groups. Thank you. Sorry, you guys are going to educate me here. So think of Wellspring as the next step up in intensity of connection groups. So they meet more often, they have more homework, that sort of thing. Now, the guy who wrote the Wellspring curriculum is a Quaker named Parker Palmer. And what I learned from him through the curriculum he wrote was that when we deeply listen to each other, we invite the other person to get in touch with their own deepest inner wisdom, with their own divinity. And so I just want to emphasize to y'all that when we do joys and concerns, I really want you to see what it feels like if you give the person who's talking your just complete, full, unadulterated, non-judgmental attention. And if there's something on your heart that you decide to share, I want you to feel what it feels like to be in a room of people who are willing to do that for you and with you. Because it is one of those practices that helps us find that divinity within ourselves and within each other. All right, with that, I'm going to open it up. Let John bring the mic around. For the joys, we join together in celebration. For the sorrows, we feel compassion. And for all that remains unspoken, may the caring of the community offer a space of deep kindness and care. As a meditation on the joys and sorrows we just heard, let us sing Building a New Way, number 1017 from the Teal Hymnal. Joe will play the hymn once through as an introduction. Please rise in body and spirit as you're able.
All right, so I'm standing in for Molly in what is supposed to be our last week of our 4-week pledge drive. But as of this morning, we have just 23 generous pledges totaling $64,000 that I've gotten in my hand so far. There might be some more out there in the mail and whatnot. But to put this into perspective, last year we had a total of 55 pledges. So we have, lots of, so like a lot of sports fans, when their team is down, I'm hoping for a fourth quarter rally. Let's just put it that way. Unitarians in general are not pushy about pledges, but unlike Molly, I'm not known for my tact. To put it lightly, right? Some people are chuckling out there. So I will simply say that if you are planning to pledge, now is the time to step up and make your commitment to the financial health of our fellowship that we all enjoy and cherish. There are pledge cards. I have some here. In the seat backs in front of you that you can fill out and put either in the offertory if you get it done in time, or you can just hand it to me later when in the coffee hour. And with this in mind, it's my pleasure to welcome Stephanie Blanick to address our last of the 4 questions Molly and the stewardship team posed to you, that question being, why am I pledging? Thank you, Stephanie.
Hello, everybody. I was asked to do this weeks ago, and I wrote my thoughts down before I knew the theme for today, so it's very appropriate. My name is Stephanie, and I have been a member of this church for 8 to 10 years. I can't remember. I grew up in a Catholic household in a Catholic Jewish Protestant community on the South Shore of Long Island. Not a typical Catholic family. Dad was nothing. Only 2 kids in the family, and Mom was an advocate back in the 50s and 60s for equality and birth control. I married at St. Ignatius in Austin in 1979, and my husband was nothing, but he has allowed me to raise my children Catholic. And my maid of honor at that high mass was Jewish. So we celebrated Christmas with a Hanukkah bush. So we moved to Georgetown in 1980, and I started attending St. Helens. My attendance was great when the kids were very little, and they went through confirmation and all that. But oftentimes I would leave irritated, depending on the priest at the church at the time. I'm a church hopper. I tried Celebration Church, and that was fine. And then I became irritated by some of the messages. So I do not view them as a true non-denominational church. Once this church moved out of Sun City, I decided to give it a try. Some of you may remember Jennifer Van Buren, who used to be a member here. She and her wonderful son, Owen. And she told me she knew I was a UU, I just need to figure it out. So, and she was so right. So even 10 years ago, my son, who ultimately is nothing, and moved to Colorado, they came back here to get married 8 years ago, and Mark Skrabatz, our previous pastor, he did the ceremony. So why do I support this church financially? Number one, it's an inclusive community. The only thing I'm intolerant of is intolerance. So I love this welcoming atmosphere. People from diverse backgrounds, beliefs, and lifestyles are embraced without judgment. The freedom of belief is very important to me. I grew up all over the world. Actually, my first Holy Communion was in Monterrey, Mexico, where we lived for 2.5 years. So we learned by living in Iraq and England and Mexico and all over the world. Social justice advocacy is so essential today. While I cannot participate because I am an elected official in every march and demonstration, do know I'm with you, and I feel very passionate about human rights, environmental sustainability, equity, diversity, and acceptance, where all really does mean all. Ritual worship, that has always been very important to me, and I'm so glad we're singing the children out. And when that Colorado family moves back to Georgetown, I will be bringing my 8-year-old granddaughter here. I enjoy the wider range of spiritual practices we have incorporated into the services. I love the Wonder Bucks. I love the book reading, and I actually am a volunteer with children, obviously. I dedicate my life to children. And I buy the books that is often shared with us. Finally, we all want the same thing: to feel accepted, useful to society, and spiritually lifted. I know I can count on all of you, and even those that do not know me, which, how is that possible? If I had an urgent need, I know you would come to help me. These are just some of the reasons I joined and support St. Gabriel. So I hope you join me. I hope you have voted. If not, please go vote. And I spent 2 years studying Parker Palmer with Courage to Teach, and that changed my life, actually. So thank you.
We take an offering each week to sustain this place we call home and to support the work of our fellowship. If this is your first time here, please feel free to let the plate pass you by. Your presence this morning is its own gift. Thank you for coming. If you filled out a visitor card, you can put it in the plate. For our offertory music, Lara and Tolis Villa are bringing us the rondo movement of the Sonatina in G by Kulau. And this is a reminder to Eric to check in with the guest musicians about the pronunciation of the words before the service. Duly noted. Thank you. wait, don't go yet, don't go yet, don't go yet. Will you share your names properly pronounced and the name of the piece?
Laura and Tullis Phi, and it's the rondo movement of the Sonatita in G by Kulau.
Thank you so much. Thank you. When we mess up, we got to make it right. Even the little things, especially the little things. We close our sacred time together when we extinguish our chalice. I offer you these words by Reverend Dr. Davidson Lair as a benediction. May we find questions more profound than answers, vulnerability more powerful than strength, and a peace that passeth all understanding.
Thank you all for being here today, and those of you who help us create this space and this meaningful service, including our tech team, the people in the kitchen, the people who clean this place up every so often so that it stays clean and nice, the people doing the music today, everyone. Don't forget to check your Sunday handout for the important announcements that I mentioned earlier, and the ones I didn't mention that are on here. And I invite everyone to stay for coffee and conversation. We've got a great spread out over there today, so check it out and get something yummy to eat. Thank you.